I'm working on this, all the stuff out there with the, we've made a fair bit of progress, but on the mulber tree, but there is this in-feed chute on the mulcher that is for slightly larger material than you come in through the top throat, and it gets a beating. It actually deals with the wood in a different way. There's a disc on the bottom with a blade that slices the end off, whereas here it's got this great big couple of teeth tines that whack them to pieces. So this is where you put the slightly larger stuff, and it worked hard enough that it's blown the top out of the chute inside of the inside of this tube here down there. I'll take it apart and show you. That happened a while ago, but I didn't have a workshop back then, so I do now. So I will look at seeing if I can get that chute back in action, because it takes larger throat material. Well, it's got a larger throat, it takes larger diameter material. So I'll pull that apart and we'll see what it looks like inside. Here we are inside. So these tines spin around and do the main chop. This tube here is supposed to feed material down onto these blades here, and as you can see, it's completely blown out on the side, so the material is not getting pushed onto those and is not cutting as a result. So I will have a look and see what I can do to repair that. Oh well, I put this, straightened out this tube down here, this bit here, and this bit here, and this obviously swings around like that and hits it, and uses this to break whatever is being fed in. And I straightened this all out, but left it with just a half tube. Now this tube is a seam down either side, and that's continued in here, and I've taken the top off it, but this seam here seems to weaken the whole thing to me. If you look down here, you can see it's curved in, and it's bent on that seam, and as this spins around, it comes around and hits the material you're shredding onto here, and that puts an enormous amount of force on it. So I am thinking that I will remove this whole piece, and I have a piece of pipe here. This pipe is the right radius for that input tube. It narrows in, and this will be, you see, it's just a little bit longer than it needs to be, which is perfect. So if I cut this pipe in half down the middle, and then I bought this strapping, which is 3mm. So the material inside of here, this stuff, is 1.5mm, and it's not up to the job. So my plan is to cut this whole thing out and make another tube out of this, cutting that pipe and then welding in this tube between the two halves. So I'll have 4 seams, but I'll fully weld the seams, and then this piece here, that's a 50 diameter pipe, I think. Yeah, it's 43, and this is 40. And if we look at this, inside of here is about 75-ish. without that flare on it. So I should be able, or 80. So with that, I should be able to get pretty close by cutting down this seam and then this tapering piece so that it tapers in like this one does. You see it tapers in. So there'll be that plate will be here and here, and the two bits of pipe will be those radiuses. And then hopefully I'll cut this out in a way that's reasonable, and I'll be able to weld in a new piece, and hopefully it won't do that when I use it. So this is 3mm, I think, or is it 2.5? This is 2.5, that stuff, and this is 3. So yeah, that's 3, and that's 2. So it'll be, that pipe is 1/2 mil thicker than this, but if I don't have it not welded down this seam, you can even see how the seam hasn't been really, it's kind of tacked at the top, and you can see that it's not actually welded all the way down, and you can see the same down here. So this will be a full piece of pipe. It'll be 1/2 mil thicker, full piece of pipe in here, and then this will be 3mm plate. So the 3mm plate will hold this, support that piece. So I'll pull this off and see if I can grind that out without destroying too much. Pipe in half. Actually had a bit of a wander off target there, so I'll just tack that in place. Actually, that one's, the shorter one's the right length. I haven't cut the other one to length. And I've cut this, or marked out this, because this has got that taper on it, and I think it might be tapering about 10mm overall over the length. I'll start with that, we'll see how we end up. But yeah, there's my mark, there's my cutout from the side that I'm going into. Well, my afternoon has become a little bit more interesting. That's a splinter right underneath my nail. So a little bit's poking out the top. So let's go and see if we can get that removed without it being too painful. I have soldered this up. And it's fairly well welded this up. I think it's reasonably well welded. Cut this piece out now. I'll put a little bit of weld into there where I can get it, and tidy that little chip out there. But that goes like that with that 45, and I just need to make sure, as you can see, that comes around quite close, and I think that's why I think this is the cutting edge. If you look at that, there's not a lot of gap between those, so I need to make sure that that is sat in a reasonable place. Got a bit gappy on the side there, I think, but not terrible, but I'll fill that in. I need to now tack that in place and make sure that that can spin without hitting it. In place now. It's a bit melty, so I'll pull this off, but even though that's a little bit crooked, I kind of had to do this because this is bigger, but I had to make sure that it missed. And it does. So that gives me my cutting edge, and even though that's not perfect, it's kind of a good approximation. I think it's good enough to work. So now I'll see if I can weld that all in place. I've tacked it in. I mean, it's mostly welded in. I'll go back around again. It's all very splattery and yucky, but it's certainly held in place. I'm just doing little hits with tacks everywhere, because otherwise it's going to melt. So I'll go back in there and I'll fill in extras. I've got a bit of a hole there to fill, but that'll be alright. I'll just put a bit of welding rod or something in there and fill the gap. But so far I'm not blown through anywhere. So my welder has got a very low duty cycle, and I must admit I'm a bit sick of my thumb. Here it is. Another day. I've just taken this off the mulcher base. So this is the pigeon poo that I've been doing. The thing that's different with this to what I've done before is that it's actually got some hope of sticking. And that is because, and it hasn't just all melted out. I've been watching a few YouTube channels, particularly a channel called Half-Assed Customs, and another one who Rat Rod Bob's builds, and they do a lot of body work. And I've never ever been competent or confident with welding anything that's not 1/4 inch or 6mm plate, or well, at least 1/8, 3mm sort of stuff, because it's always just melted out on me. Now I've got a little CIG welder. It's an Australian CIG brand, 140, and it's a pretty cheap arc welder, and so it's not super great to use, but it does work. And the thing I've been doing differently with this is, rather than trying to run a weld all the way along here and then it just blows out, I've seen these guys that know what they're doing, and they put a tack, 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 and they come back and tack, 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 and they work their way through just with quick tacks. And I went, of course, why wouldn't I have thought of that? But I never did. I always tried to start down here and then weld my way along, or start here and weld across like that, and it just blows out. And that makes sense when you think about it. Just what's going to happen. So by hitting it, just hitting it quickly with the tack, and then hitting it quickly with the tack, and then hitting it quickly with the tack, and then going back and doing that next to it, you can actually get a weld. Now, it's an ugly weld for me at the moment. I don't know how much of that's me and how much of that's my cheap welder. I think that they both contribute. I don't think it's entirely down to me, and I don't think it's entirely down to the welder. I do have a gap to fill here, and I've been watching, again, Half-Assed Customs. He gets a welding rod and just puts it inside the gap and welds when he's filling up something like that. So I might see how that works. But it doesn't really matter particularly, other than I want this to be as strong as it can be. And I'll also weld down inside of here as much as I can, and from the top, because this thing takes an absolute beating. Because as I showed you, those tines actually swing around and use this as the other side of the cutting edge. So you've got the tine comes around and it sweeps past there, and I'm sure that it uses that to beat it off, break it off. Which is why the previous thing broke. Anyway, this is just an experiment. Well, it's just an exercise in trying to weld something I never would have been able to weld before, and would have never tried. And you know, if I start getting a bit better at it, I might do some more welding. Heaven knows, I might even consider, my wife's asked me if I wanted to TIG welder, and after quite a bit of investigation and looking around, you can buy multifunction welders. MIG TIG arc, oh, MIG arc TIG it says on the box, and that TIG has an asterisk next to it on all of them, and they don't sell it with a TIG torch. Oh, hello, something went beep beep beep, I wonder what it was. Anyway, I didn't think I had any over there. So I was talking to a guy. It was at one of the shops. I won't say which shop because he might not be. Well, I thought he did his job very well. What he was talking to a welding rep who knew about these things, and apparently to do reasonable TIG welding, you want to have DC. We want to have an AC welder, and you need to be able to take care of. There's a few settings. You need to be able to set how long it's on positive and how long it's on negative. And you use negative earth to strike the arc, and then you jump the spark, and then it switches to positive, but then it oscillates between them, and there's a whole lot of parameters that you can adjust. And also there is you know, you can get your power down really low or up quite high, whereas this little thing, yeah, I can adjust the power on it. I could reverse well, actually this doesn't even have, it's so cheap it doesn't even have the leads go straight into the welder, so you can't even swap them. So I don't know whether I mentioned, but this handle fell, separated from the connection terminal broke off, and I was standing there trying to strike an arc for probably a minute, wondering why it wasn't doing anything, checking my earth and everything, and the lead was actually lying on the floor. So I thought I might buy another lead to make it better, and maybe a good lead would help the welder, but in fact you can't swap the leads without opening it up. But anyway, you got an adjustment on the power, but apparently the guy was saying with all of the lower cost welders you can't get the power down low enough to make a good weld with thin material. So the very sort of thing you're buying a TIG to do, it won't do. But if I start doing more welding, I might look at getting a slightly better welder with MIG arc, not worry about the TIG, and then in some distant galaxy where I've learned to TIG well enough and do enough of it, I might lash out the $900 to set up for TIG, but I really don't think. I think I could pay someone who knows how to TIG weld for quite a bit of TIG welding with the $900 that I would spend on my own. So the only reason I'd buy one is if I wanted to learn to TIG as an exercise in itself. I think economically it makes no sense. It's just if I wanted to get that skill that I'd get one. Anyway, I'm going to add some more weld to this, and we'll see how it goes. Here's the undressed final weld. Again, there'd be proper welders out there that really know what's terrible about this, but honestly it's stuck, and I've decided I won't try and get in there because I've actually got a real good meaty chunk of weld on here. It might be certainly a bit cold up here where it's sitting up like that. If I chose to, I could get my grinder and make that look a little bit prettier. So, but I am quite convinced that this is not going to fall out with that weld on it. So I reckon that I'll get my grinder and I'll see. You know, it's going to be tricky getting in there, but I can tidy that up a little bit. Or not even bother, just put some paint over it. I might try it out first though and give it a run and see whether this actually does its job, but it looks like it will, so yep, we'll give it a crack and see what it does. I've put it back together again now. do need to put a, there's a screw that goes in there. There's two of them. I can only find one, and now I can't find it. I could only find one, but there it is. I did a bit of grinding on it. I will put some paint on it when I've proven that it works. But that is not going to come out in a hurry. I'm pretty confident of that. So it might not be all that pretty, but it was done with my little cheap arc welder, and I've never been able to manage to achieve anything like that before, and I'm fairly confident that this is the original. And so my design doesn't have the splits down the side where they get whacked continually by the blade, so that should be stronger. I've got thicker wall thickness, and it's not exactly perfectly square or whatever, but it's missing the blade by what I reckon is about the right amount, and I think that should work. So I will give it a go, and we'll see how much success I've had. But I'm quietly confident there's nothing to go wrong here.